Hey, this is Russ with Saber Historical Fencing. Not going to do an awful lot of talking head videos on this channel, but we'll do some because culture counts and training culture counts. If you're going to spend time in a method or working with people who are going to be your favoriteest sword friends ever, you want to make sure you're compatible with them. So we're going to lay out a few ideas here and there, and the one I wanted to talk about today first is control. Control is physical and control is emotional. First and foremost, when you first start learning to swing the stick, you're going to spend a lot of time wondering where your body is. You won't have yet developed the proximal control that drives a blow from the center of your body unless you're coming in with significant prior training. So initially, when you're trying not to hurt your partner, you're likely to be pulling a blow or artificially tensing at the end of your cuts. This is not what we want when we're fencing. You gradually need to learn the ability to make your cut end where you want it to. That is, specifically to blow through your opponent's guard because you're training that, or to end when you get bound because you're training that, or to be working in a drill where you're not wearing a lot of safety gear, so you're planning for your cut to end 4 or 5 or 6 inches away from your opponent's body, but close enough that they know whether or not they made the block or that blow came through their defenses. Control is a very specific skill that we consider very important. Now, part of that is because, at least partially, I come out of a French martial arts background where control is simply a mandatory part of training style culture. There is no such thing as responsible fencing without control in this culture. It also gets into the emotional and psychological side, though. I have picked up a bewildering variety of injuries over my martial arts career, enough to make a failed cheerleader wince. She did. And if you know anything about cheerleaders, you know they get busted up just as bad as football players do. Almost every one of those injuries happened during two-people drills, not during bouting. When you are bouting, your safety and your opponent's safety are your responsibility, whether it's a tournament or an informal situation. And the higher the stakes, the more you are responsible for their safety. When you are drilling, it is your responsibility not to get target lock or to get caught up in the moment where you're desperate to make the hit land, but for you to be in control of what happens when I swing, what happens when I block. Your emotional control over yourself is part and parcel of your physical control of yourself. Your nervous system does not distinguish between the two. It's not an accident that actors have to learn how to portray anger, sadness, depression, etc. in their bodies as well as just on their faces. So when you're bouting, you swing for a certain area. When you're fencing, you govern your techniques according to what you want to achieve. And the higher the stakes, the more important it is to do that. We get into this in period, historical texts where they're talking about simultaneous hits, what originally becomes right of way, what the Italian fencers would call ambo, or both people got hit. Well, let's unpack it and find out what happened. Who's at fault here? We don't go in for the afterblow. Yeah, historically it happened. If you're on a battlefield, you swing like heck and try to get out of it in a condition that you're still not knocked out of combat. And we have a lot of circumstances where a single blow didn't do the job. Barbary pirate fights, we have records of guys taking 3 or 4 blows to the head in order to put them out of combat. That happens. But in the fencing school, that's not what we're doing. In the fencing school, you're working on perfecting your defense to the greatest degree possible. So if you and your opponent hit nearly simultaneously, it may be judged that you were at fault because you got target lock and you swung for what you wanted to hit as opposed to taking care of your defense. And if this were a quote-unquote real situation, you are now useless to your unit because you've been put out of combat. It may be a circumstance in which you attacked and the opponent actually did a good job defending, and you shouldn't have continued the blow, but should have rolled back onto defense or active defense, what they call contraparries, before remising or continuing your attack at another side. These sorts of things are almost always an issue of psychological control, not physical control. When your overwhelming desire to hit the target takes over your brain and you forget what you're actually doing, you've stopped being in control of yourself. And it's every bit as serious as not knowing whether your blow is going to strike a parry or break the guy's blade. So this is something we emphasize, and we emphasize it a lot. And I encourage you in our society where this is a hobby, where we do this stuff to improve ourselves and to have fun, if it's not part of your fencing culture, to seriously consider making it part of your fencing culture. So you don't wind up with lots of guys who really enjoyed the hobby and then are desperately unloading their gear because they're too broken to train anymore. Thanks, happy training. We've got more videos and content coming, so if you liked what you saw and it was useful for you, please stab the like button, /subscribe, and punch the little bell icon so that you're notified immediately when new content comes available. Thanks, and go do the thing.